The year was 1998, and the small town of Willow Creek had never seen anything like it. Nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forests, the community prided itself on its quiet charm and close-knit families. But that all changed one cold November evening when 12-year-old Emily Carter walked out of her house to check the mailbox and vanished without a trace. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the town, leaving neighbors questioning everything they thought they knew about safety and trust. As days turned into weeks, then months, hope began to fade. The search parties dwindled, the news cameras packed up, and life in Willow Creek tried to move forward, but no one ever truly forgot about Emily. And 3 years later, what investigators discovered would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Emily wasn't just any girl. She was the heart of Willow Creek. With her bright smile and boundless curiosity, she lit up every room she entered. Her parents, Sarah and Mark Carter, were pillars of the community. Sarah ran the local library, and Mark coached Little League Baseball. They were ordinary people living an ordinary life until the unthinkable happened. On that fateful night, Emily had been wearing her favorite red hoodie and carrying a flashlight, as if she were prepared for some late-night adventure. When she didn't return home within minutes, her mother grew worried and called the police. What followed was a frantic search involving hundreds of volunteers, K-29 units, and even helicopters scanning the nearby woods. Yet despite their best efforts, there was no sign of Emelina, a single clue to explain where she might have gone. As time passed, theories swirled around town. Some believed Emily had run away, though those who knew her well dismissed the idea outright. Others whispered about strangers lurking in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting children. A few even suggested darker possibilities, pointing fingers at neighbors or acquaintances whose behavior seemed off after the fact. But with no evidence to support any of these claims, the case went cold. For 3 long years, Emily's face stared back at the townspeople from missing posters taped to lampposts and storefront windows. She became both a symbol of loss and a reminder of unanswered questions that refused to go away. Then, in the summer of 2001, something extraordinary happened. While hiking in the woods outside of town, 2 teenagers stumbled upon an abandoned cabin hidden deep among the trees. At first glance it appeared deserted, its roof sagging, its windows boarded up. But when they peered inside, they found something that made their blood run cold. A series of crude drawings pinned to the walls, depicting scenes of young girls trapped in cages. Beneath the drawings lay scraps of fabric, including what looked like pieces of a red hoodie. The teens immediately reported their discovery to the authorities, setting off a chain reaction that reignited the investigation into Emily's disappearance. Investigators descended on the cabin, combing through every inch of the decrepit structure for answers. What they uncovered defied belief and left them grappling with horrors they couldn't unsee. At the center of this renewed investigation was Detective Laura Hayes, a seasoned officer known for her tenacity and sharp instincts. She had joined the force shortly after Emily's disappearance and had always harbored a personal stake in solving the case. To her, Emily wasn't just another name on a file. She represented every child who deserved to come home safe. When Laura arrived at the cabin, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The air inside was thick with decay, but beneath the musty smell lingered something more sinister, palpable sense of dread. As she examined the drawings and fragments of clothing, a chilling realization began to take shape. Whoever had created this shrine had been watching Emily and possibly others for a very long time. What struck Laura most was the level of detail in the drawings. Each one depicted a different girl, their faces etched with terror as they reached out from behind bars. Some wore outfits that matched descriptions of other missing children from surrounding counties, cases that had gone unsolved over the years. It was as if the artist had been cataloguing his victims, turning their suffering into macabre works of art. Laura's stomach churned as she pieced together the implications. This wasn't the work of a random kidnapper or opportunist. It was the handiwork of someone far more calculated, someone who thrived on control and fear. And based on the condition of the cabin, it seemed he had used it as a base of operations. For years before abandoning it, back at the station, Laura pored over old case files, searching for connections between Emily's disappearance and other unresolved incidents. She soon uncovered a pattern that sent chills down her spine. Over the past decade, at least 5 other children had gone missing under similar circumstances, young girls between the ages of 10 and 14, all last seen near wooded areas. None of the cases had produced solid leads, and most had been written off as runaway situations or tragic accidents. But now, armed with the evidence from the cabin, Laura began to suspect they were dealing with something far more sinister, a predator who had been operating undetected for years, slipping through the cracks of small-town law enforcement. Meanwhile, Emily's parents were thrust back into the nightmare they had hoped to leave behind. For 3 years, they had clung to the fragile hope that their daughter might still be alive somewhere, waiting to be found. Now, faced with the grim reality of the cabin and its contents, they were forced to confront the possibility that Emily's fate had been far crueler than they dared imagine. Sarah spent sleepless nights staring at old photos of her daughter, while Mark buried himself in work, unable to process the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Their grief was compounded by guilt for not being able to protect Emily, for letting her walk out the door that night, for failing to find her sooner. The reopened investigation brought little comfort. Instead, it reopened wounds they had barely begun to heal. As word spread about the cabin and its disturbing contents, the town of Willow Creek found itself gripped by paranoia. Parents kept their children indoors, afraid to let them out of sight, even for a moment. Neighbors eyed each other warily, wondering if the monster investigators were hunting had been living among them all along. Rumors flew faster than facts, fueled by fear and speculation. Some claimed to have seen suspicious figures lurking near the woods in the days leading up to Emily's disappearance. Others swore they heard strange noises coming from the forest. At night, the once idyllic town now felt like a place where danger lurked around every corner, where trust had been shattered beyond repair. Despite the mounting pressure, Detective Hayes remained determined to uncover the truth. She assembled a task force dedicated to connecting the dots between the cabin and the missing children, enlisting the help of forensic experts, psychologists, and even criminal profilers. Together, they painstakingly reconstructed the timeline of events, analyzing everything from soil samples to weather patterns in an effort to piece together what had happened to Emily and the others. Every new discovery seemed to raise more questions than answers, deepening the mystery rather than resolving it. Yet Laura refused to give up. She knew that somewhere out there, someone held the key to unlocking the secrets of the Cabanand, bringing closure to the families who had waited so long for justice. One breakthrough came when a forensic artist was able to recreate the face of one of the girls depicted in the drawings using digital technology. The image bore a striking resemblance to another missing child, a 9-year-old named Lily Monroe, who had disappeared from a nearby town 6 years earlier. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigative team, confirming their worst fears. The person responsible for Emily's abduction was likely a serial offender with a chilling mo, but identifying the perpetrator proved to be a daunting challenge. No fingerprints were found at the cabin, and DNA evidence was scarce. Whoever this individual was, he had taken great care to cover his tracks, leaving investigators with little more than fragments of fabric and haunting artwork to guide them as the investigation dragged on. Tensions mounted within the community. Some residents accused the police of incompetence, demanding answers they couldn't provide. Others turned their anger inward, blaming themselves for not noticing the signs sooner. Amid the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged when an anonymous tipster contacted the station, claiming to have information about the cabin. The caller refused to reveal their identity but promised to send photographs that could potentially identify the artist behind the drawings. Laura held her breath as she waited for the images to arrive, knowing they could either crack the case wide open or lead them further down a rabbit hole of uncertainty. When the photos finally landed in her inbox, Laura's heart sank. They showed a man standing in front of the cabin, his face partially obscured by shadows. Though blurry and grainy, the image offered a tantalizing glimpse of someone who might hold the answers they desperately sought. But just as quickly as the lead appeared, it vanished. Attempts to trace the source of the email led to dead ends, and the man in the photo remained unidentified. Still, Laura clung to the belief that they were closer than ever to catching the person responsible. Somewhere out there, someone knew the truth, and she was determined to find them. As the investigation pressed on, Detective Laura Hayes found herself haunted by the image of the man in the photograph. His face was partially hidden, but there was something about his posture, his slight lean to one side, as if he were trying to blend into the shadows that made her skin crawl. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd seen him before, though she couldn't place where or when. It gnawed at her, this nagging sense of familiarity, like a half-remembered dream, just out of reach. She spent hours poring over old case files, flipping through mugshots and witness sketches, hoping for even the smallest connection, but nothing clicked. Whoever this man was, he had managed to stay invisible for years, slipping through the cracks with terrifying precision. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark Carter were struggling to hold their lives together. The reopening of Emily's case brought a renewed wave of media attention, and reporters descended on Willow Creek once again, camped outside their home, shoving microphones in their faces, asking questions they didn't have answers to. "Do you think your daughter is still alive?" one asked during a particularly brutal interview. Sarah froze, her hands trembling as she clutched a photo of Emily. Mark stepped in front of her, his voice firm but laced with anger. "We're not giving up hope," he said, his jaw tight, but deep down, both of them knew the truth. Whatever had happened to Emily, it wasn't likely to end well. Still, they held on to the slimmest thread of possibility, praying against all odds that somehow, somewhere, their little girl might still be waiting to come home. The town itself seemed caught in a strange limbo between fear and fascination. On one hand, people were terrified who wouldn't be, knowing someone capable of such horrors could be living among them. On the other hand, there was a morbid curiosity, an almost magnetic pull toward the macabre details of the case. Kids whispered about the cabin during recess, daring each other to sneak closer to the woods after dark. Adults debated theories over coffee at the diner, speculating about who the man in the photo might be. Some pointed fingers at reclusive neighbors. Others suggested drifters passing through town. No one wanted to believe the culprit could be someone they knew personally, yet suspicion hung heavy in the air, poisoning relationships and eroding trust. Laura's team worked tirelessly, chasing down every lead, no matter how small. One promising angle came from a retired park ranger named Bill Harper, who claimed to have seen a man matching the description near the woods around the time of Emily's disappearance. According to Bill, the man had been carrying what looked like a duffel bag, moving quickly and deliberately as if trying not to be noticed. At first glance, it seemed like a dead end. The ranger admitted he hadn't thought much of it at the time, but when Laura showed him the photo, his eyes widened. "That's him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sure of it." The confirmation sent a jolt of adrenaline through the team, reigniting their determination to track the man down. But identifying the suspect was only half the battle. Locating him proved far more difficult. The cabin had been abandoned long before the teens discovered it, its contents left behind like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Forensic teams scoured the area for DNA, fingerprints, anything that might tie the man to the scene, but the elements had erased most traces of human activity. Even the scraps of fabric linked to Emily and Lily Monroe yielded frustratingly inconclusive results. Without hard evidence, building a case felt like trying to construct a puzzle with missing pieces. Every step forward seemed to uncover two steps back, leaving Laura and her colleagues increasingly frustrated. In the midst of the chaos, another subplot began to emerge, one that added layers of complexity to an already tangled web. A local woman named Margaret Klein came forward with information she initially hesitated to share. Margaret, a middle-aged widow who lived alone on the outskirts of town, revealed that her teenage son, Ethan, had gone missing under mysterious circumstances several years earlier. At the time, authorities dismissed his disappearance as a runaway case, citing his troubled past and rebellious streak. But Margaret insisted otherwise, claiming Ethan had confided in her shortly before vanishing, saying he'd stumbled upon something bad while exploring the woods. She never pressed him for details, afraid of what he might reveal. But now she wondered if his fate was connected to Emily's and the others. Margaret's revelation opened up a new line of inquiry, forcing investigators to consider the possibility that the predator they were hunting had targeted boys as well as girls. If true, it meant the scope of the crimes was far broader than anyone had imagined. Laura arranged to meet with Margaret, hoping to glean more insight into Ethan's final days. Sitting across from the grieving mother in her dimly lit kitchen, Laura listened intently as Margaret described her son's last words. "Mom, I think I saw something I shouldn't have." Her voice cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks. He sounded so scared, like he was in real danger, and then he was just gone. The parallels between Ethan's story and the others were impossible to ignore. Like Emily, he had vanished, without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions. Laura promised Margaret she would do everything in her power to find out what happened to her son. But privately, she worried about how many more victims might be out there, their stories buried alongside the rest. The weight of the case grew heavier with each passing day, pressing down on her shoulders until it felt like she was drowning. As tensions mounted, the investigation took a dramatic turn when a second anonymous tip arrived, this time in the form of a handwritten letter delivered directly to the police station. The envelope bore no return address, and the handwriting was shaky, as if written in haste. Inside, a single sentence read, "Look closer at the ones who stayed silent." The cryptic message sent chills through the department, raising more questions than answers. Who was staying silent, and why? Was the writer trying to protect themselves, or pointing fingers at someone else? Laura's mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. The phrase echoed in her thoughts as she revisited old interviews, searching for anyone who might fit the profile. There was Mr. Grayson, the quiet school janitor who always seemed to fade into the background. Mrs. Dawson, the librarian known for her sharp tongue and disdain for children. Even Pastor Lewis, whose sermons often veered into unsettling territory about sin and punishment. None of them had concrete alibis for the nights the children disappeared, but none of them had raised red flags either. Could one of them be hiding behind a mask of normalcy, playing a role while harboring unspeakable secrets? Just as frustration threatened to boil over, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Emily's best friend, Claire Bennett. Now 15, Claire had been reluctant to speak publicly about her memories of Emily, fearing she'd say the wrong thing or dredge up painful emotions. But after seeing the news coverage of the cabin, she reached out to Laura, insisting she remembered something important. When they met at the station, Claire recounted a conversation she'd had with Emily mere days before her disappearance. Apparently, Emily had mentioned spotting a man watching her from the edge of the woods while walking home from school. She said he gave her the creeps, Claire recalled, her voice trembling. She thought maybe he was lost or something, but he just stood there, staring. Claire's account sent shockwaves through the investigation. For the first time, they had a potential eyewitness description of the suspect. Laura immediately dispatched a sketch artist to work with Claire, hoping to recreate the man's likeness. Hours later, the resulting drawing bore an uncanny resemblance to the shadowy figure in the photograph. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to narrow the focus of their search. Armed with the sketch, the team launched a full-scale manhunt, scouring records and databases for anyone matching the description. The climax of the story approached with relentless urgency. Leads poured in faster than the team could process them, each one pulling them deeper into the labyrinth of lies and deception surrounding the case. Late one night, as Laura reviewed surveillance footage from a gas station near the woods, she spotted a figure entering the framer. Tall man wearing a hooded sweatshirt, his face obscured, but his gait unmistakably familiar. Her heart pounded. As she zoomed in on the image, her instincts screaming that this was the break they'd been waiting for. Cross-referencing the time stamp with recent sightings, she realized the man had been spotted heading toward an isolated cabin on the outskirts of Towner, location eerily similar to the original crime scene. With mounting dread, Laura assembled a tactical unit and prepared to raid the property. As they approached the cabin under cover of darkness, the air crackled with tension. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves set nerves on edge. They moved silently, weapons drawn, hearts hammering in their chests. Inside, the faint flicker of candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls. And then, as they pushed open the door, they saw it. A shrine unlike any they'd encountered before, filled with mementos of the missing children photos, trinkets, locks of hair. In the center of the room sat a journal, its pages splayed open, revealing chilling entries detailing the abductor's twisted obsession. But where was he? The cabin was empty, save for the grotesque display. Had they arrived too late? Or was he still out there, watching, waiting? As Laura flipped through the journal, her blood ran cold. The final entry read, "They'll never understand why I did it, why I had to keep them safe." Safe from what? From whom? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the team secured the scene and called for backup. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of secrets yet to be uncovered, dangers yet to be faced. The discovery of the journal sent shockwaves through the team, but it also deepened the mystery. Who was this man, and what did he mean by keeping them safe? The phrase gnawed at Detective Laura Hayes as she stood in the eerie silence of the cabin, her flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. Every item in the room seemed to tell a story: photos of smiling children frozen in time, small toys wrapped in delicate fabric, locks of hair tied with faded ribbons. It was both horrifying and heartbreaking, a grim testament to lives stolen too soon. Yet for all its macabre detail, the shrine offered no clear answers about the abductor's identity or whereabouts. As much as they had uncovered, the man himself remained elusive, a ghost slipping through their fingers, just as the team prepared to leave the cabin. One of the officers noticed something unusual: a trapdoor beneath a tattered rug in the corner. Heart racing, Laura knelt down and pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp and musty, carrying with it an unsettling chill. She signaled for the others to follow, her gun drawn, every step creaking ominously underfoot. At the bottom, they found themselves in a makeshift basement, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. And there, against the far wall, sat a row of cages. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Inside one of the cages lay a young girl, frail and trembling, her wide eyes filled with terror. Her hair was matted, her clothes torn, but there was no mistaking who she was: Emily Carter, alive, for 3 agonizing years. The town had mourned her loss, assuming the worst. But here she was, locked away in this nightmare, enduring unimaginable horrors. Laura rushed to the cage, calling out softly, "Emily, we're here to help you." The girl flinched at first, clearly traumatized, but eventually nodded, tears streaming down her face. Carefully, the team worked to free her, their movements deliberate and gentle, as paramedics tended to Emily upstairs. Laura turned her attention back to the basement. There were other cages too, though most were empty. Now, in one corner, she spotted a pile of old blankets and clothing, along with a stack of journals identical to the one upstairs. Flipping through them, she realized they chronicled not just Emily's captivity, but the fates of several other missing children. Some entries described how the abductor had taken them from their homes, luring them with promises of adventure or threats of harm to their families. Others detailed his warped justification for holding them captive. He truly believed he was protecting them from a world he saw as cruel and dangerous. It was a chilling glimpse into the mind of a predator whose actions defied logic yet stemmed from a twisted sense of morality. But the biggest revelation came when Laura stumbled upon a name scrawled repeatedly throughout the journals. Pastor Lewis. At first she thought it might be a coincidence, a random name jotted down without meaning. Then she remembered the pastor's sermons, his fixation on themes of salvation and sin. Could it really be him? She called headquarters immediately, requesting an urgent background check on the clergyman. Within hours, the pieces fell into place. Records showed that Pastor Lewis had lived in multiple towns over the past decade, always moving shortly after reports of child disappearances surfaced. His alibi for the nights the children vanished, flimsy at best, often citing late-night prayer sessions or solitary walks in the woods. By dawn, the police had surrounded the church where Pastor Lewis served. When they confronted him, he didn't resist arrest. Instead, he calmly admitted to everything, his voice steady as he recounted his crimes with disturbing detachment. He spoke of the children as if they were part of some divine mission, claiming God had chosen him to shield them from the evils of society. To him, their suffering wasn't cruelty, was salvation. As shocking as his confession was, it brought a measure of closure to the families who had waited so long for answers. Though nothing could undo the pain they'd endured, knowing the truth allowed them to begin healing. For Sarah and Mark Carter, seeing Emily again was a miracle they never dared to hope for. Weak and fragile, she required months of medical care and therapy, but slowly she began to recover. Her parents clung to every moment, cherishing the chance to rebuild the life they had lost. Margaret Klein, too, found solace in the knowledge that her son Ethan's disappearance hadn't been in vain. Investigators discovered evidence linking him to the same predator, confirming he had tried to intervene before meeting a tragic end. Though justice couldn't bring Ethan back, it gave Margaret the peace she needed to move forward. The town of Willow Creek would never be the same. The scars left by the case ran deep, etched into the memories of everyone who lived there. Parents grew more vigilant, schools implemented stricter safety measures, and neighbors made a conscious effort to reconnect, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. The cabin became a somber reminder of the darkness that had once lurked in their midst, eventually torn down to make way for a memorial dedicated to the victims. A plaque bore the names of those who had been taken, including Emily and Ethan, honoring their resilience and ensuring they would never be forgotten. As for Detective Laura Hayes, the case changed her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Solving it had been her greatest triumph, yet it weighed heavily on her soul. She carried the faces of the children with her everywhere she went, a constant reminder of why she chose this line of work. But she also found strength in the resilience of the survivors, in the way communities came together to support one another, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy. It reinforced her belief that no matter how dark things got, there was always a glimmer of light waiting to break through. In the end, the story of Emily Carter and the mysterious cabin served as a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit. It reminded us that evil exists in the world, yes, but so does courage, compassion, and the unwavering determination to seek justice. For the people of Willow Creek, it was a lesson learned the hard way, but one they vowed never to forget. And as the sun set over the valley, casting long shadows across the quiet streets, the town began to heal, carrying with it the memory of those who had been lost and the hope that such horrors would never happen again.